My name's Lawrence Medina. I'm the Executive Director for Rio Grande Alcoholism Treatment Program. And we're happy to present our lecture this evening by our wonderful colleague, teammates, you name it, Dr. Ted Wiard. Just a couple of the emotional healing lectures started last year that Golden Willow Counseling in Rio Grande decided that we wanted to provide a message of hope in that was related to recovery, and that we wanted to kind of broaden our net of not only just our clients but the community as a whole, that that we felt that that we wanted to contribute to the healing, with Rio Grande. We partnered up with Kit Carson Electric, which we're grateful that they allow us to use this building for free. So thank you, Kit Carson. And I know Ted will fill in the gaps. I think this is our seventh lecture. We've had some in the past of grief and loss, finding your authentic self, healing trauma, healing the pains of codependency. And you could go to YouTube under Rio Grande ATP and you could download those videos. We wanted to and also want to thank Francis Santisteban, our video guy. He's an awesome producer and he helps us out. So thank you, Francis. And introducing the topics, and I know Ted will make some other announcements. So the presentation tonight is spirituality within recovery, and I'm really excited to hear Ted. I haven't heard this one. I've heard a lot of his lectures, but this is one I haven't, so I'm looking forward to it. And what's interesting is that I'm in long-term recovery, and what that means, I haven't had a drink or a drug in over 28 years. And fortunately, I was also a former client of Rio Grande back in 1991 on my way to prison. And, went by my way to the state hospital instead. And I found recovery here in Taos. So this is where my journey of recovery began. And so I'm a product of Rio Grande, Taos Detox, Tri-County. And this is where I see the light. And so what spirituality means to me, it means everything to me. Like they say, don't talk about politics or religion or sports. We're not going to talk about politics. Well, maybe a little. But anyways, my point is that when it comes to recovery, spirituality plays a big part of it. And it's not about religion. And the beautiful thing of other practices out there that one could choose their own conception of spirituality, or better yet, a higher power. It has really transformed my life over the years, having, spirituality in my life, which I choose to call God, and this spiritual path, this walk, through the good times and the challenges, it's something that I could lean on. When I was locked up in the mental institution and you have 4 walls, you're on suicide watch, you don't have a lot of options. You're thinking, and then when I get out, I may be going to prison. And, being hopeless, I really understand what that's about. I understand what it is with no hope, and maybe, can continue to drink and drug or try to hurt myself or put myself to sleep where I never wake up again. That was my solution. Also the normalized dysfunction and how I dealt with life is that I drank, but the harm that I caused other people around me. And this addiction that I seen that it was killing me, but also was destroying everything around me. But every day I woke up and I just knew that as my solution. I didn't know there was another way out. And I'm fortunate. I'm fortunate to have found recovery here in Taos. I'm very blessed and grateful to have found spirituality. And that's a big part of my recovery. So just a little experience, strength, and hope of my background. And with that, I will introduce Ted. For you those who do not know Ted, he has a long list. He's Reverend Ted. He's a therapist, independent therapist. He's a grief and loss therapist. Did I say Reverend? I said Reverend. He's a tennis pro, a ski pro. No, I don't know about that. He does a lot in our community, and we're very blessed to have Ted as our clinical director, both for Golden Willow Counseling and Rio Grande. He also supervises an office down in Vegas. So we do a lot of work together, and we at the Rio Grande team are very grateful for him. So with that, I'm going to introduce Ted Wiard. Dr. Ted Wiard, thank you.
It's good to see you. Whoa. It's good to see everybody here, and thank you for being here. You know, everyone has chosen to be here tonight. It's Super Tuesday. A moon is coming soon. All these different things, and no matter what and how you got here, you chose to be here tonight. So I really appreciate that. There's 100 reasons not to be, and there's 100 resistors or thousands of resistors of, oh, I'm too busy, I got this, I just want to go do something else. And you've all chosen to be here, and that means a lot of your bravery and strength. Because our system doesn't want to do that. Mm-hmm. Our system says, ooh, this might help me. I'm out of here. And that just goes for all of us. So I really want to honor, first of all of you for being here. I put the Serenity Prayer up there because we'll be talking about it. Sherry came up to help me. Thank you, Sherry. But I did something on purpose, so I decided to put it under the line. The Serenity Prayer is, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Without spirituality, we stay with knowledge. And knowledge sits in the brain. Wisdom is when we move it to somewhere that's so much deeper. And that's a big piece of what we're talking about, is how do we move something to wisdom? And so that we're actually held on that piece and have something rather than just sitting cognitively in our brain. So just wanted to start with that. That is the most difficult discipline I've ever done in my entire life. It's that simple, complex, difficult prayer. Actually seeing what I cannot change, and then looking at what I can possibly have the courage to change and to know the wisdom of that, the wisdom, not just the knowledge. I can sit here and go, yeah, I really should get on that treadmill someday, that's really good knowledge, but it's actually moving that extra step. And so it's knowing that wisdom that we're going to talk about tonight. So a few logistics. First of all, thank you, Lawrence. And he's heard all these lectures because he gets stuck in a lot of cars with me. And these guys were a little surprised, Melissa, Francis, because I actually had a PowerPoint, which means my ADHD has to be a little bit more under control. And then we'll forget about the PowerPoint as long as they always have a chalkboard for me. So I do want to thank you all, as well as Rio Grande, Golden Willow Counseling, as well as Golden Willow Retreat, Kit Carson Electric, and all of you. Because guess what? We often forget, if you guys weren't here and I wasn't here, this room would be sitting empty tonight. Hopefully we have the chance to do something special tonight. And so with that, I was thinking about this, and when I chose to do this, Melissa finally sat me in front of a calendar and made me get handcuffed for the entire year of different talks and pieces, because that's the hardest piece. You can ask Sherry in the back on that as well. But back in 2005, when I was working at Betty Ford Center, we drove to Phoenix one day because the guru of trauma was doing a talk on trauma and spirituality. We were so excited, and we drove, and we were so excited, and it was so boring. The talk was horrendous. And he's actually a good speaker, and I was like, I am never going to do a talk where I combine grief, spirituality, and recovery, because I see it's almost impossible. Mm-hmm. I was talking to Carol. She had a very similar situation down in Albuquerque. I started thinking about it when we were talking about our lecture series, and part of it's because we don't combine those. And so I said, well, I'll step out of my comfort zone and try to combine them. So hopefully tonight, we're going to look at grief and loss. We're going to look at addiction in the brain, and we're going to look at spirituality. In other words, we're going to be looking at emotional, physical, spiritual, and intellectual. The physical, I'll get the 2,000 steps on my Fitbit while you guys get to sit still tonight, but that's okay. But really bringing those three together, and the fourth one, we're all here, we're breathing, and hopefully we can take care of ourselves. Glad you're here. But trying to bring those together is almost as difficult as 20 years ago trying to talk about grief. Even the word grief seems so difficult. Then 9/11 happened. It made the media, and all of a sudden grief was okay. In that process, we've gone from there. I'm sorry that happened, but at least it's being normalized. So my hope tonight is we can combine all of those. I do want to honor Golden Willow Retreat. It's what brought me back to Taos after being gone for a long time. It's out in Arroyo Hondo. It helps with a lot of this stuff. It was the seeds. Golden Willow Counseling actually came from this due to with Tri-County shutting down and realizing we needed to add more support within our town. And so Golden Willow Counseling grew from that. Marcel and I started Golden Willow Retreat back right around 2000. And so it's still an emotional healing sanctuary focused on grief and loss. We do the grief groups in town, as well as a lot of community service, as well as I talk a lot. And people from all over the world luckily come and stay with us. So but that's out in Arroyo Hondo. The chapel was built by 10, 12-year-olds, and who aren't 12 anymore. And they came out and they homeschooled for a year, and through that chapel, we ran their whole 6th grade curriculum and built a chapel with a mission that it's always open and kind of warm, rather than always warm, but it's locked. And so people come and just hang out in the chapel. In my travels, I found I could show up at a church or something and just want a place to hold me, and it was locked. Or I needed to pay $5 that I didn't have, or I needed to buy a candle, or I needed to be of a certain religion. I'm not dissing any of those rules that people have, but there's no place I could just go and be. And so it's the Capilla de las Angelitas, the Chapel of the Little Angels. And so it's out in Arroyo Hondo, and if you ever want to just go out there, go check it out. We have candles there to light. It is worthwhile to call Golden Willow in case we're doing a ceremony of some sort in the chapel. It's kind of weird to show them, but what's up? So, but please know there's Golden Willow retreats out there. So my intentions for tonight, and I hope yours, are really to have a better understanding of spirituality and recovery and what that might look like for each of you. I am in no way pretending I know what that looks like for any of you. And a good day, I have a hint what it is for me. So tonight has nothing to do with trying to slam anything into your heart, into your brain, or anything. This is a chance to come together and explore that piece and really look at how loss, recovery, spirituality, and all those different pieces might fit together so we can come from a place of wisdom rather than knowledge. And really look at those. Now, semantics get in the way, and we have this cognitive dissonance of judging something or having it out here or being angry that some word was used in these different places when anything's getting close to home. As I was doing my run this morning, right now it's on the treadmill because it's so dark, I just started thinking of the words and just started realizing how many different words can mean God or lack of, and how they can trigger us in so many different directions. What is a higher power? What is God? And so our brain, actually, the part that we speak from, not me or mouth, but where I'm trying to come up with stimuli to have something come out here that maybe is comprehensible, comes out of the mouth, it's about this big. And then the receiving piece is about this big as well. And yet we have this massive brain and something probably even larger than us. And so we can get caught in verbiage because they get caught in different ways. My mother, who died this year, but I still honor her so deeply on this, her trigger word was loss. Well, my brother died in a shipwreck up in Alaska, and everyone on the boat was never found except for my brother. And so she stayed in contact with all of those parents. They had loss of a child, and she knew where her son was. And so they still go up, and that was in 1989. And so she'd get upset with me, and she'd call me and say, I see on your website that you still have loss of a child. I'm like, Mom, yeah, I know, But I know where Richard is. I know, but Mom, if I just put child dead on the website, no one comes to the workshop. Well, I guess that's okay. So each person has their trigger words. And also they can be trauma words. So tonight, if there's a trauma word, please let me know. I'll do my best. We had some wonderful people out at Golden Willow Retreat a little earlier this year who had witnessed their family being murdered. Their trigger word was trigger. And she looked at me with the most empathetic, compassionate eyes and goes, I know you therapists are going to use it, but please do your best. So let's be aware of that. So I apologize ahead of time if there's any word that's triggering. Please know I have pure good intent. But we have so many different words. And so tonight, I'll probably use God, I'll probably use higher power. But please know, whatever goes for you. And that also can mean none of the above. I'm also not assuming everyone even knows what higher power is or believes in a higher power. But we get to play with that tonight. With the promise, I'm not trying to convince you otherwise. So let's head on. So, religion and spirituality. Very interesting combination. And I know for the longest time, actually until I went to treatment, I thought they're exactly the same. And so if we take this, we have religion here, and spirituality here. Let's see what fits in those two circles. So what comes to mind for anybody with religion? Rules. Church. On the Creator.
Memorization.
Bible. Punishment. Sin. Ritual.
Sacraments.
Heaven
and hell.
Oop, those two combined well. Heaven and hell, and then I'll get whatever was over there. Was it Sunday?
Sunday, yes.
Sunday, heaven and hell. Commandments. Denominations.
Judgment.
Judgment. Doctrine. Now you're warming up.
Confession.
Prayer. Love. Tithing. Shame. Money. Hypocrisy. Here you go. Sacrifice. Hierarchy. Did I hear that or did I make it up? Okay. Either way, I heard it.
I say fellowship.
Fellowship. Awesome for saying that. Forgiveness. Community. Dogma. You know, I used to say that one of the biggest things about Golden Willow Retreat is there was no dogma. And then I realized we had dogma, no dogma. And so I actually had to change my talk on that, just to becoming wiser. Any of the others? And, you know, we'll break some ice. Pedophilia. Jesus. Yeah, Jesus. Oh, Jesus, okay. We'll put Jesus in another section. And so, to so many people, it can mean so many things. And so there's religion. And then it doesn't mean that to all of us, but we have some of our ideas out there. What about spirituality? Compassion.
Serenity.
Humility. I didn't hear that one. Relationship. Humility. Self. Grace. Source. Gratitude. Solitude. Evil. Yeah. Evil. Crystals up the nose. And I'm not meaning drugs.
Prayer and meditation.
Prayer and meditation. Connection.
Worship.
Worship. The earth. Joy. Joy? Joy. Airy fairy.
Nature.
Nature.
Peace.
Peace. The Torah? Who spoke? Is that what you said? Okay. Thank you, Dan. Surrender. So we start to fill this up. We start to see that both of them, depending on someone's view at that point, or the macro of that, maybe not even the micro, can mean about anything. What most people can agree on is that religion is organized. Not meaning negative or positive, and we actually need community, and it's a way to be organized. So we can agree this is organized. And spirituality is individualized. It's an individual piece. Now the beautiful thing is for many people, it's what it is to you that fits in this little section. Just that little section. That maybe it's both, maybe it's one, maybe it's the other. I like to think of religion as a beautiful vehicle that allows me to connect spiritually. I'm definitely a spiritual seeker. And yeah, I went to ministerial school. We were joking about that. Lawrence and I go, yeah, I had to go to school for 3 years. You paid $30. But, and so we had to study these pieces and really what it is in this area that makes it up, that allows me that wisdom, that piece of holding. And so tonight, as we're talking about these, we're going to be talking about spirituality, honoring all religion, what works for somebody or doesn't work for somebody, but what that individual relationship is for each of you in your own special way. So as we're talking tonight, I think it's super important. I knew it was for me the first time that I played with this idea that we thought about that area, just that center and what that means to me. Luckily, over time, with the positives of both, that center has expanded and expanded and expanded. And I'm so grateful for that. So I don't have to, try to protect this little piece, and you're different than me, so instead, wow, we're all here doing our best. And any way we can connect is a good idea. For me, a big part of spirituality is connection. And that's why I'm so excited to be here. And Melissa, where are we going next? So I'm going to break down some pieces and just look at addiction cycles and these different pieces. So we're going to talk a little bit about addiction as well as the cognitive piece of that. So we talk about the recovery cycle. And we talk about that craving and how do we start to move that to a healthy habit rather than going into our usual ritual, which is what our brain wants us to do, use guilt and shame, which increases serotonin, demand for dopamine, which goes to that trigger and leads to more craving, and we get caught in that cycle. I believe a big piece of spirituality is how do we have the strength to curve here and find healthy habits. That's why I'm so amazed and so humbled and so grateful. All of us, including me and the puppy dog, are here. Because we didn't go to our regular ritual and we tried to move to a healthy habit. And so that's such a huge piece. I believe recovery of any kind, and I'm a huge believer in emotional sobriety that leads to many other places of serenity, is actually a miracle, a true miracle. We override our brain that says if I don't use, in whatever form that use might take, it's saying if I don't use, I'm going to die. And I override that and say I'm going to do something differently. I'm not talking about our intellect. I'm talking about deep down in our brain. So it's no different than this goldfish saying, okay, I'm stuck in this desert of pollution and a mess. So I'm just going to jump over to that pretty bowl. That's a miracle. Any and every time we're able to do that. So I honor that so deeply. Recovery, I see, as refinding mine or your balance. According to SAMHSA, aren't you glad, Lawrence, that I'm actually quoting SAMHSA? Recovery is a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. And many days, it will feel like that goldfish having to jump to a whole different bowl. So it is a miracle. It does take a community, no matter how it looks, however it is, so to support the sanctity and dignity of an individual and their family's rite of passage during the recovery process. It takes that bench. That happens to be my family, and my personal life is me in that picture today. But it takes the community to support that. Something that is underneath us that can allow us to be held. And the dignity, that's such a big piece. We are all human beings doing our best, and we are all doing well. We're all here today. So what are addictive behaviors? American Medical Society will let you know quite often that it's a chronic disease. We will die from addiction. It worsens, but just if it's not worked with and we don't move into recovery. No different than many other areas such as diabetes. We have to continuously repair. We have to continuously do our disciplines in order to live. It's not an individual disease. We don't get to do it alone. It's also a family disease. With so many people, that includes organizations. That includes our direct family. That includes our family we've chosen. It's all those pieces. The other day, I was at a funeral, and the same person goes, Ted, do you want a beer now that we're done with the funeral? I go, no, I don't drink. Thanks a lot. Within 5 minutes, Ted, now do you want a beer? And so quite often, even our family that maybe we've chosen has that piece. When I was working at Betty Ford Center, I did a call after someone has left treatment, and they say, Ted, I got home, and my dad handed me a glass of wine and said, congratulations, you've done so well. Let's toast. And none of this is done out of maliciousness. It's a family disease. And so this family of emotional support, along with spiritual support, is such a huge part of it. I see addiction, this is just me quoting myself, addictive behaviors any time we override the healthy and proactive choices and decide to do something that is detrimental to self, family, profession, or community. A speaker in Santa Fe that I know well, he's a professor. He used to work for the embassy in Hong Kong. And in Hong Kong, porn can give you a life sentence in jail. And even with that, on the U.S. Embassy copy machines and that sort of thing back in the day, so this was quite a while ago, he's in there copying porn. Even though he might go to jail forever, he's definitely going to be fired. There's other pieces. That's addiction. When we override all the things that could lead to quality, and we override that with this other part of our brain, which we'll get to in a minute, and go ahead and still do it. That is addictive behavior. So what is loss? We talked a bit about addiction, we talked about these pieces. Loss is any time that my foundation has been shattered. The definition of me, the perception of who I am, and my perception of safety. Anytime that foundation has been rocked, shaked, rattled, decimated, I have lost. Grief is from that place where I've lost my definition of who I am. Grief is the process, natural, normal, by the way, process of redefining myself into the present situation. Luella came to start working with us about 3 and 4 months ago. Even that, hopefully she's grateful. I know I'm grateful and she's happy. Even losses are when we change a job. Even if it's for right on, here we go, this is a new one. And then they're like, oh boy, put on the seatbelt, here we go. But loss is any time that this is going on. So we can have loss for many different reasons, not just what we usually talk about of sad reasons. When I was working as a dean at admissions out in North Carolina at a college, we worked really, really hard on the freshmen. Now on the accountant side, it's cheaper to keep someone than go get another person. But on my side, it was in the middle of their grief process called that first semester. How do we help them start to realize they've been redefined? Right, in those first 2 weeks, where do I get laid? How do I get laid? How do I go get this drug? How do I party over here? And all of a sudden I'm on probation because I have all F's. Well, no one was telling me to go to school and work. And so how do you help someone in that redefining of what they used to be to what they are today? So loss, as we just said, leads to fear, loss of trust, depletes passion, the illusion of safety is shattered, cling to the past while overwhelmed by the future. And those two collide, and I'm in a free fall. So that is that piece of loss. That shakes our identity. Maybe our identity wasn't that solid to begin with, but that true identity, my core soul, that we try to ignore that voice and maybe even lose that voice. There's a piece of us that still strives to thrive. No matter how someone's culture dependent or individuated or more of an introvert, there is a piece of also how do we connect and what's just my heart want and how do I continue to heal and grow. And I use the word selfish actually as a good word. It's the study of oneself and how do I get better. Even on that selfish side, how do I improve my quality of life? Rather than what I've normalized, which is usually comfortably miserable on a good day. And so then we end up with burnout. In that free fall, we end up lost, confused, unsure, unclear, perplexed, disoriented, bewildered, frozen, not knowing what that next step is. Well, our brain jumps in. I love our wild little brains. And in the science of the world, we're going to actually break it down so simply and so complex at the same time. This prefrontal cortex is where values, morals, inhibitors, I don't want to do that. I shouldn't punch Lawrence in the nose tonight because then I get to go. I don't think I'll do that. All these different pieces. It's the part of my brain that has these different pieces that are from the soul, the alma, creativity. One that confuses people, it's also where rewards exist. And that's thinking of, if I do this and this and this, it will lead to a better quality of life. It doesn't mean the part of the brain that's instant gratification. That's not a reward. That's instant gratification, which can have many consequences. The limbic system, down in this part, keeps us alive. It's fight, flight, freeze, fornicate, and feast. And if I have the disease of addiction and use, in other words, I am just trying to survive. I'm willing to fight. I'm willing to flight. And by the way, fight tonight, there's a piece of your brain that fought. That's what got you here. So fight doesn't always mean out there throwing blows. It can mean that too. Flight, when I back out, sometimes flight is good. Oh, that dog is about to attack me evilly, so I think I'll scoot back. Luckily, this dog is peaceful and just wonderfully laying here. So, and then freeze, when those two collide. That's where grief lives. And then fornicate is fornicate. It's making babies. And so, and feast is eat more. Now, it can also be the lack of those. And then use, I have discomfort. If I don't use, I think I'm going to die. So this is what the brain does. And the dance for dominance. This is the big piece. As we get older and our prefrontal cortex, which is also the frontal lobe, matures and grows, we start to have this wonderful thing. Supposedly, I'm more optimistic than this. Supposedly, it's kind of done around age 28. But that doesn't negate neuroplasticity where we can continue to grow. Plus, if we have any addictive tendencies, thank you. If we have any addictive tendencies, a lot of our maturation of that prefrontal cortex stopped whenever we started using. So I'm 57 years old, and if I've been using this whole time, let's see, I started using in 4th grade, so what's that make me 9? So really parts of my brain are still as a 9-year-old until I have recovery and I find ways to grow that prefrontal cortex. So most of my brain is down here. Over maturation, I start to move, so my prefrontal cortex, that frontal lobe, is dominant. I still need my limbic system. So we're not trying to get rid of either. The other day, before I did this funeral, the same day I was offered these beers, I went out with a former student of mine. He's like, okay, Ted, you just keep skiing totally wired. So we're going to go down Pipeline, and then we're going to go down Valkyrie Chute, and then we can go do totally wired. I'm totally in my limbic system. I am going to die, I am going to die, I am going to die, I am going to die. But it makes me more hyper alert. And I could go down my prefrontal lobe and be like, okay, I'm just going to tell my friend, okay, I'm willing to do this, but you better be willing to wait, because I'm not going to rush. And so I could use both, but then I could be on alert. So stimuli goes in to the limbic system first. It always has the head start. And then if I have enough safety, I'll get up into my frontal lobe. So we work with these areas. And then we start working in these areas of the frontal lobe and being able to communicate. Spirituality lives in the frontal lobe. Yeah, I'll say it. So if I'm in a traumatic place or I'm in my limbic system, I don't feel there is a God. Because my brain has gone on, and all I'm worried about is living in this second. There is no kumbaya. None. So as we can feel safety, as we can develop more of that prefrontal cortex, we can have that place. And it takes time, called a lifetime for many. Thank you. In this, we've talked about this in other groups in here, we do emotional and cognitive regression in the midst of addiction and loss. We actually become all the way back to birth in our maturation and our cognitive functions. So we go all the way back to here. Now, I wanted to use this slide again because also it's the development of codependency and of spirituality. When I'm born, who's my first gods? Mom and dad, caregivers, whatever they happen to be, because I need to be fed, I need to be protected, I need to be covered, and there's a lot of other wants, but otherwise I die. And so my first gods, I'm already screwed, so all the codependency books get to make a lot of money because my first gods are false gods. They're human beings. And they're going to let me down. And then maybe I get a little bit older, and then all of a sudden, maybe God is this white-bearded old man up with a finger going, don't you dare masturbate, or the lightning's going to come right through the ceiling. Okay, and so I learned that there's this thing out there watching me. Whoa. Okay, and then I get a little bit older, and I realize, wow, I went and broke that window, and I still didn't go to hell. So maybe there's something else out there. And then I become a teen. And what's my next God? That first girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever kind of friend. And everything else goes away. And I am in heaven until she says no. Okay, so we start to move back and forth. So we're moving back and forth to humans. And then when she says no, I find out those beers really did help. And I have a new false God. As we get a little bit older and this prefrontal cortex develops more and more, all of a sudden we have creativity, spirituality can grow, and we can have something larger than us that's not a false God. This is a scale that I just love, that I just found one day, and it's really what I believe all of us are trying to do. I believe any therapist with integrity and care, this is all we are trying to do, hopefully at home as well as in our office. That's really trying to get that place where we're doing the upward spiral of contentment, hopefulness, optimism, rather than in our emotional relapse coming down. Okay, there's the boredom, and then everything sucks, and what's the politics gonna do, and why am I sitting here listening to TED? All those different pieces. Now I'm mad, now I'm gonna do some revenge, and we call it stinking thinking. But it doesn't mean you get to just jump out of it. So the real work is how do we find ways, the wisdom, like in the Serenity Prayer, and the disciplines that allow for this to happen. So all of a sudden we're choosing to get married, or we're choosing to do any of these pieces, or maybe for the first time, I like myself. We had a woman a few years ago who came to Golden Rule Retreat, very wealthy woman from Hong Kong again. That's interesting. She had no mirrors in her house because she despised herself. She could not look at herself. And by the time she left, she could look in the mirror and say, I love you, my friend. Thank you for being who you are. That was her next 90-day homework. I think she made it 23. But the whole idea is start to feel safe enough to move back into that frontal lobe where we can have enthusiasm. We had an awesome person the other day, and I go, you are such a survivor. And she looked straight at me and goes, I don't want to be a survivor anymore. I want to be a celebrator. There's that gap. There's that difference. That's the goldfish jumping from comfortably miserable or miserably miserable and finding I can have a quality of life again. The brain, which I talk about a lot because I love, when we have any type of emotional trauma, which includes addiction, we move into these areas of loss of short-term memory, high impulsivity, hypersensitivity, and high irritability. And within that, we start to have that emotional regression, and these things are going on. I think I'm crazy, I think I'm sick, and I'm alone, and here's my prayer. In that space, I then demand to be rescued from an outer source, which means I now have a false god at that time. If Melissa would just pay more of attention, then she'd change those, don't change the slide. Then she'd change those slides, and I wouldn't be so nervous over here. So in other words, Melissa, you have just become my higher power, and you're going to take care of this. And you're not. So we move through those different pieces. So then my brain gets caught in these different sections. In that, we have emotional regression that leads to external playing and search for an external relief. And when it's not a person, and I'm starting to blame it on this outer world, my system thinks it's going to come from the external. So that's where addiction falls in, until I add spirituality. This is a huge piece. We need to have these levels within Maslow's hierarchy in order to also start to develop these different pieces. That takes time. And these I don't see as just stages. This is the physiological, safety, social, to esteem, to self-actualization. I can still have a cruddy day and think I'm a piece of poop and all those different pieces and not feel safe. But then I can use my disciplines of any time I've been up in this area of spirituality to help pull me along. So finding ways to have safety, which usually doesn't come from an external false god, but internally where the chapel is located, is how we start moving there. Well, it takes a big journey of recovery. I found this sign actually in Gallup, New Mexico. But I loved it because it talks about grief and recovery. Private road. In other words, no way. Do not go in here. Enter at your own risk. That's not true. There's a lot of support. Open mine shafts that you're going to fall down. Never crossed our mind maybe some of those open mine shafts are actually the gold of the heart. Unpredictable animals and methane gas. In other words, you know what? I didn't really want to go down that road, but then the towel's pulling me. we went down that road and checked it out. So we overrode our frontal lobe and went down there. But that's actually what our brain is saying when we try to do recovery. It's trying to say, don't go there. Stay comfortably miserable. We know this goldfish bowl. It might be dead and nothing's in it and it's all full of pollution, but I know it. And that jump just seems so enormously huge. This I found one day and I didn't like it. I didn't like it so much, I liked it. Opportunity for enlightenment comes from destruction. Make no mistake about it. Enlightenment is a destructive process. It has nothing to do with becoming better or being happier. Enlightenment is the crumbling away of untruth. It's seen through the facade of pretense. It's the complete eradication of everything we imagine to be true. I started thinking about that and all of our constructs that we build. How do we move those away so we can find our true heart? Destruction leads to chaos, but leads to the opportunity of reconstruction to a higher quality. Because I volunteered, I get to talk about me. And so this is actually my mom. I picked this slide last night. She died about 7 months ago. But she's still such a huge part of my world as well as my spirituality. In third grade, she would let me take my $1.75. I would walk and go to the little diner, and then I'd just walk until I found a church and go to it. Just alone. And then so I'd show up at the synagogue and listen to that, fall asleep, and then I'd go to this one. And she just gave me that freedom. Also back then there was a lot more room, so by the time I was 12, I found myself in this El Rito, not this El Rito, a commune. I actually went because I thought I was going to see a lot of naked ladies, but it doesn't last very long. But I actually got to actually let my brain grow, and I got to see how this commune wasn't culty, and they were gleaners. And so they traveled the country after the farmers would finish with their fields and pick the leftover field, bring it to the food, and bring it back. And then they'd play music and probably get pretty pedo, but I didn't know that at the time. But she gave me this freedom. Even though she knew her religion, her spiritual path, her peace, she gave me this freedom to go and glean and find the pieces that work for me. Luckily, I graduated before she died, and so she also believed deeply in education. And so do I, even though I've never liked school. But let's move on and see. So what brings me the passion of this place was in a very short time period. First of all, I almost died. And then Leslie and I had Carrie. And then we had a miscarriage, which kind of shook us up because it was the first time we were kind of on different pages. Then we got pregnant again. And right before Amy was born, my brother Richard died up in a shipwreck in Alaska. And so we didn't really get to think about it much because Amy was born right after that. And so that was pushed down. And then a year after Amy was born, we found out Leslie had sarcomatoid renal cell carcinoma, which is sarcoma and carcinoma, so kidney and brain cancer. She was supposed to live for 7 weeks. Luckily, she lived for 2 years, and I just really see that as my true heart doctorate, was watching that process. So she's still the keel on my boat, without a doubt. My present wife, Marcella, is very grateful for Leslie because Leslie made me a good husband. And so Marcella appreciates Leslie. But then Leslie died, and I found myself with a 5 and a 3-year-old girls. I'd braid their hair in the morning. They'd get to school, and the teachers would re-braid their hair. And even while Leslie was alive, sometimes I would, when she was down at chemo, I'd dress them for school the next day and beg them not to pee the bed that night just because I didn't have the energy to dress them in the morning. But we found a way after Leslie died. We started our world going again, and we got things moving forward. And we let her ashes go. And we released her up on Gold Hill with my dog Mai Tai and with other family members. But it was time to release her and start our next part of our life. Well, and then a couple years after that, I was coaching the Taos Tigers down in Albuquerque, and I got a phone call from my stepfather. Ted, this is Charlie. This is not a joke. There's been a horrendous wreck. Amy has died. Their grandma, my mother-in-law Rachel, has died. And it doesn't look good for Carrie. Carrie died the next day down in Albuquerque, where I was coaching. And so I found myself shattered, destroyed. And the brain kicked in. The survival brain. What false gods are there? What's anything? There is no God. There must be a God because I'm praying for help. But if there's a God, there's an evil God. There's all this stuff going on. And the brain just went on from there. And I realized my life had been in this grief process. So it started out, I guess I can be racist on this one. The two honky kids of Taos High. There wasn't many of us back then. It was 4% white. Got married, started our life. Things looked good. Tennis pro, school teacher. Don took tennis lessons from me back then. Ski racer. Life was good. Things were moving forward. And these losses started to happen. And they actually started way before that. Different traumas, different places actually starting their birth. And so the whole of my boat was already filling up. And as I got older, from childhood, preschool, abuse, divorce, confusion, all those different pieces, the boat continued to fill. And then hits adolescence, puberty, other different trespasses into my world, being teased, all these different pieces that happen. That just happen. And they're part of our world. But the whole of the boat continues to fill up. Andrew, can I tell a story about your brother? Sure. So, 9th grade, we're in football practice, and back then I was the only white boy on the team until Mike Hensley joined it too, because then I could get off and go skiing instead, but he stayed on. We're at football practice, and everything was in Spanish. I didn't know Spanish very well. I was getting in trouble, and all of a sudden, Michael stepped out and said, "Hey, we need to do this now." And so in the middle of that, being so alone, and in that place, in this whole of the boat filling up, it doesn't mean there's already little God shots coming in different connections of just, hey, I see you, I hear you, I value you. And so those different pieces start to happen even though the whole of the boat's still filling. Now, those of you that are parents or getting ready to blame your parents, guess what? We don't have a prefrontal cortex, so we grieve differently. We're still going to fill the whole of the boat. And we're going to have these redefinitions. And so we go on through our life. And teens hit, and there's the puberty piece, possibly virginity, losing your virginity, or keeping your virginity. Either one, you just feel like you're out of place. I've actually, at Taos Academy, been doing a class once a year. And they're like, Ted, will you come teach sex ed to the 10th graders? I'm like, sex ed to 10th graders? How do you do that? And so I actually turned it into sex and suicide. And showing how, as that whole of the boat is getting so full, no matter what decisions I'm making, not one way or the other, I feel I'm doing it wrong, I'm not good enough, and how, so we worked actually with how this piece and suicide prevention, and how do we work to hold that self-esteem as the whole of our boat is definitely sinking. And so we could fall in love, we fall into hate, we question everything, we try to individuate, we're full of shame, and even though we're not going to go into it tonight, shame I see as an acronym of should have already mastered everything. And every time I've tried to walk across that pond, I have to swim. I haven't walked across the top of it, so I shouldn't have mastered everything, as well as guilt, and these pieces are falling in. We also aren't as we're developing, our spirituality is probably coming more from a religious place rather than a connection, but we're also starting to have these other feelings. I could dance with the snow in the ski valley. I could go for a hike. I could notice some elk. I could start having these other pieces that went chunk and could sit within my system, yet the whole of my boat is still filling up. Thank you. Late teens, relationship. Oh, I'm supposed to pass school too. And so we get caught in this piece. It's what we do developmentally, but also within that, maybe the whole of the boat is getting more full. What happens to most juniors in high school? Where are you going to go to college? I just wanted to go to drive-in and be in a relationship. What do you mean, when am I going to go to college? What are you going to do when you grow up? Well, I'm still asked that, and I have no clue. So we have these pressures, and we have events, and our brain doesn't know how to work with them. And this is quite often when addiction kicks in well, or poorly, however you want to see that. Because all of a sudden, all this pressure, all this pain, and this hole that's so full needs some sort of release. And so all of a sudden I start finding these releases, and then my brain, all of a sudden the limbic system goes, this is what I need to stay alive. It overrides all of my intellect, all of my wisdom. It's now part of fight, flight, freeze, fornicate, feast, and use. That includes breathe, eat, all those different pieces. And so all of a sudden I have these secrets, and I believe we're as sick as our deepest secret. That's where the fifth step comes in. And so we find different ways. So now I'm pushing those down, I'm pushing that around, and I'm protecting this. I like to say, my wife gets mad, I have this really stinky diaper, and I'm the only one who doesn't know it's stinky, and I'm protecting it at all costs. If I ever told me I could take the diaper off, wipe my butt, and put on a clean diaper, it would have been nice. So anyways, those secrets continue. I'm in young adulthood, I have to go get a job. All of a sudden I find out that I have these bills. I find myself in jail. I find these other pieces, and I have no clue who I am. And then by the time I'm an adult, I can still feel totally deserted. And in all of this, my brain is saying, I need to go use. Now, please let, for the whole group in here, use can mean so many different things. It can mean alcohol. It can mean substance. It can mean humans. It can be anything that I'm using outside myself to try to rescue me. And it doesn't work, but we try. And so I'm talking about emotional sobriety. If I have emotional sobriety, that helps in all of the others. In the midst of that, we have this catalyst. Something happens. Maybe I get a DUI. Maybe my family dies. But all of a sudden, that whole of the boat comes crashing in, and I find myself stripped to the core. All the stuff that mattered seems to disappear. And I'm shattered. I'm shaken. That enlightenment poster. I've had destruction. And I'm in chaos with the opportunity for reconstruction rather than recycling dysfunction. And so we have the grief process. And we're not going to go into that heavily tonight. I've already done that. Pull it up on the YouTube. I just did you a plug. And we can look at it. But denial is that insulation piece. Anger is a protest. It's just, I don't like what this is going on. That's an emotion. I don't get to control my emotions. On a good day, I can control my behaviors with those emotions. But the emotions that bubble up don't have to make sense. They're just bubbling up. It's what I do with them. Bargaining is a shoulda, coulda, woulda. I wish I was doing this. I wish I could have done that. It's also the place that spirituality starts to sneak in. Because I'm searching. I'm yearning. I want a different story, but maybe I can't find it. Don't believe it. Depression within loss, as also the loss of self and all these other losses. It's that sad. I surrender. I'm no longer fighting for my dirty diaper. I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted of being exhausted. I'm exhausted of normalizing this world I've been living that I'm not really living. So depression is such a precious moment, even though we've been taught, no. It's that piece where we drop. It's where ritual and ceremony live. Now, in loss, depression, is situational depression, and it's giving me that opportunity to drop. In the olden days, we'd have rites of passages. Maybe we'd go kill our first deer. Maybe we'd start our menstrual cycle. We'd have these things that would happen within our life that would allow us to drop. And then in that, we'd have ceremony to honor that next step of our life. We've lost that. And so in the last 20 years or maybe 30 years, rites of passages have been sex and drugs. And so I'm hoping we're coming back to these pieces. Within that, acceptance and acknowledgement. Now, this is really important. Acceptance within our healing process doesn't mean everything's cool, everything's chillax, everything's right on, that doesn't matter anymore. No, loss still sucks. It still just sucks. It sucks when mom's not here. It sucks I can't hold my children physically. But in that, acceptance means I'm acknowledging a fact. Now, some people in recovery don't like this piece that I say. I do, so I get to say it. I believe we have to claim we've been victimized instead of saying we're fine, which means freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. And you can change that F into anything else you want. And so instead of pretending we're fine and having to do this stuff, this hurt. I have loss. And in that moment, I make a choice. I feel I've been victimized. I acknowledge it, and I can empower myself to start to heal, or I can empower myself or disempower myself and demand an external rescue and recruit the reasons I'm a victim, which includes pour me another drink. Wine, give me some more wine. Screw you, I'm going to use anyway. Or do I empower myself and start to heal? And start to look for other ways of doing this. The unknown is spirituality, grace, healing. These pieces I don't think we can demand. I cannot look at Lori and say, Lori, you must forgive that, She's gone, boom. She won't do that. But she's going to say, no way, even if we do it to ourselves. Through this process of grace, these pieces jump in. And then relocation. Moving to that wisdom like in the Serenity Prayer. Finding ways to connect. Finding ways to love rather than just protect. And so we move through that and we start to remove the resistance. And we've already done that, so we get to jump on. And here's where it starts to be big. This is actually at my daughter's funeral. Both of them, there was 3,000 people there. And it didn't mean I didn't feel completely alone. And so in the midst of this, we can have people everywhere and we can still be alone. And yet with those people in that community, we have this energy that starts to connect us and realize we're not alone. And we start to rebuild and have a new definition of spirituality. So we're in a free fall. That's actually my brother, the one who died. That was in the USA Today a very long time ago, because you can tell by the K2 skis. But we're in that free fall. And so spirituality and recovery allows us to have more of a solid landing. It allows us that we can have the faith that we can make the jump and somehow land. These last 2 weeks have been pretty wild personally in my world, and yet I know we can do this jump. I know we can land, and it feels right here. And so these different times when everything seems so chaotic, it's like, okay, we went off the ski jump, and we are up there. But now let's use our disciplines so we can have a safe landing. So let's go to the dry race. That's just for me to remember. So with that, let's add some spirituality. So that one of my losses that we talked about before is when I was in 7th grade, I was too busy partying. I'd ditch 7th period, and I'd go and get all whatever. And 7th period was art. So I never learned how to do art. So, and actually that artist, he hangs out on the plaza and does art. And he'll say, That's Ted. He was in my art class, and he just doesn't know that I never went. So this is a human being. We have natural boundaries just to protect us. We don't need all the energies flying into us. Some things we want to keep out, others we keep this way. Well, then all of a sudden we find this thing, we'll call this a beer, or whatever it happens to be. And we start saying, wow, things are feeling a little bit better. But in that, we start to close off the other connections. And then this person over here that we've been connected with, well, they had some natural boundaries as well. But all of a sudden, as these start to happen, they're like, screw it. And they start to close off. What are some of the feelings inside this bubble? Fear. Anger.
Self-hatred.
Self-hatred.
Resentment.
Resentment.
Comfort.
Comfort.
Loss.
Loss. Rage.
No.
Loss of control or control, both?
Yeah.
Okay.
Isolation.
Isolation.
Shame.
Shame. Guilt.
Safety.
Safety.
Numbness.
Numbness. I heard something over there.
Is it victimized?
Victimized. And this gets bigger and bigger and fills more and more. This is my diaper. And also it gives me more reasons to use because I'm now in this bubble by myself. Now the person out here, what do they feel? Anger, futility. Full scrambled eggs on that one. Confusion. Confusion? Carol, what's that? Okay. Is that you, Daniel, to help me out? Thank you.
Betrayed.
Betrayed.
Loss.
Loss. Fear. And this grows as well. Let's get whatever that judgment. Resentment. So these diapers are starting to look pretty similar. And both of them are closed off. Well, then all of a sudden, maybe I find some way of having recovery. And maybe it's Michael Tenodio in 9th grade who says, hey, bro, we're supposed to get up now. You can quit doing those push-ups. Rather than everyone laughing. Or whatever. So I poke a little hole through here. And maybe they do, maybe they don't. But as I start to open these holes, there can be connection. But before that happens, whatever a higher power means to somebody, here we said individualized and I say connection, that kind of gets blocked off too. And so now I'm not connecting to anything, so I must be God on my own path. It's not working real well, but because I'm disconnected there and I'm so isolated. I watched Lori almost have tears, well, not almost, have tears in her eyes as she was talking about her pain 7 years ago, 8 years ago, and that pain of being suffocated within this bubble. As I start to open up, maybe this person or another person, or a connection, or a group, or a program, there starts to be connection in this area. And as this energy grows, maybe this has been redefined, but all of a sudden I start finding other connections. Now on the radio, when I'm being interviewed, not the interviewer, quite often I'm asked, so how do you know when I'm starting to feel better? Now you'll usually say when I look out the window and I see the bird, or I notice the grass is green, or I know what season it is, or I even know if it's day or night, literally. So all of a sudden, I start having connection to something bigger than me. And then I do some of my work. I do more of my work. I find different ways to hold this energy. I still keep healthy boundaries, but I don't have to be isolated. I become more authentic. maybe this person goes away, maybe they don't. But I find people that work with me, are connected with me. They don't have to be all like-minded, but maybe you're soberly. And I have my boundaries now. I have a connection there, and there's something bigger than me that's also holding that energy. And it might be noticing a bird in a tree. When I feel like I'm losing it, I'm getting to the mountains and I'm going walking. There's one herd of elk, and I think it sees me coming, and it's like, crap, here comes Ted again. We have to go to the other side of the hill. But I also try to build my Medicaid fund, but they don't accept it. But we find ways to know that something is bigger than me. After my daughters died, my family died, I found myself all the way in Australia, literally planning to kill myself and just figuring out how I was going to do it, when I could do it. But something kept me alive because all my family didn't mean to die, so how could I purposely die? And doing this whole process, it happened, I was in the Daintree rainforest and walking along this trail. It happened to be Thanksgiving. Well, guess what? Australia does not celebrate Thanksgiving. And I had nothing to be thankful in that moment. And I was miserable. And I thought maybe this is the day I needed to die. And right about that moment, some turkeys ran across the trail on the Daintree rainforest. Turkeys on Thanksgiving Day in the Daintree rainforest. I ran down the trail, got in the car, drove back to Cairns, and immediately went to the library and looked up just to make sure there really were turkeys in the Daintree rainforest. I'm glad there were. But those little God shots, those little moments that say, Ted, there's something bigger going on here, start to be seeped in. So all of a sudden now I don't need to take a shot. I can absorb a God shot. And so it's like, okay, for that billionth of a second, frequency, intensity, and duration, I was able to realize there was something bigger than my diaper. And I could claim that peace. So we move on. I have no clue where the slides are going because I want to do this because it's so important to me. So we're going to stay on the dry erase for a little while. I'm going to continue to draw. Ed Sandoval would be proud of me. So here's my world, and I'm born. That's a flower, just by the way. And so I have this flower, and it's called me. Beautiful rose, thorns and all. And I have this flower. It grew in the soil. Well, as I get bounced around and I use or don't use and different things happen, I start getting some pollutants, we'll call, in my soil. Well, within those seeds are the weeds. And I start growing weeds that are taller than my little flower. What could some of these weeds be? Drugs? I'm going to do the easy ones. Alcohol? Loss? Now, what am I using to medicate? Porn? Food? Gambling? Electronics? Spending?
Anger.
Rage and anger?
Sleeping. So I start growing these weeds, and it could be huge. Control, all these pieces. And these weeds are growing because my soil isn't clean. And that's just the way it is. There's no shame in that. It's just what's happened. And all of a sudden it's like, man, this flower is croaking. Now, as we're here, maybe I have one drug of choice I really like. Not trying to trigger anyone, so I'm not even going to name it. But I have this one that I am having a loving relationship with. So all of a sudden Larry tells me, Ted, you've got to quit that drug of choice. So I say, okay. I'll just bounce to another one. I call this addictive interaction disorder syndrome. And the reason I call it that is actually because people really listen when you talk about AIDS. Addictive interaction disorder syndrome can kill us.
So what we need to do is go down into the soil and start to do the emotional healing, clean out our soil. And within that, I'm going to use red now. Allow our flower to really grow. Now, there's a tough part about addiction. There's still stuff getting into the soil. Just like if any of you are gardeners on the external world, you still got to weed. So we have to build disciplines, which I call our bedrock, that can hold that. Maybe it's the 12 steps. Maybe it's community. Maybe it's treatment. Definitely spirituality. And so we grow these different pieces so then when the winds blow and these other seeds come in, we can do something about them. I like to think about the acequias. That's what I grew up making all my money doing. But within addiction, we have, just like the acequia madre, we have this piece within our brain. The water goes down, we open the gate, we go party or do whatever, then we close the gate. Somewhere along the way, that gate breaks. And now all the water just always goes down there. Boom, boom, boom. So now we can't just keep trying to fix the gate because the gate's gone. And so in recovery, we have to redefine our world and build the acequia madre so now it goes above that spot and comes back down. Well, guess what? There's still prairie dogs, there's still coyotes, there's still just good old erosion, gravity, the neighbor who's trying to steal your water, all those different pieces. So it means we have to maintain this so that we don't go down that broken acequia gate. And then we can water the field the way that it needs to be. So in this, we start to build this. It's no longer lost, and that sun can shine. So this piece really has helped me because we're going to continue to have loss. Recovery, spirituality doesn't mean there's not days that still are just so messed up. But now we have something to walk through it. Let's talk about spirituality. Within the stages of recovery, we have pre-contemplation, which means I'm not even thinking about it. You know, when I was 7, I wasn't thinking about spirituality or recovery. I was just out probably playing ring and run and causing trouble and making fires where I shouldn't, seeing if I can hold the firecracker and doing all those wonderful things. Then somewhere in there I have contemplation. I have that idea of maybe something's not quite right. And so from there, I start to prepare. Well, maybe I'll call Lori next year. Well, life's still not going very well. Maybe I should think about doing this. Maybe I'll go to a meeting. Maybe I'll go to an Al-Anon meeting. Maybe I'll go to an AA meeting. Maybe I'll go to church. I start to do maybes. Somewhere in that prep. And sometimes that prep includes getting arrested or any of those pieces. You know, the first time I ever thought about preparation was when I got arrested at Disneyland. I'm allowed back in for our conference, by the way. But sometimes that's when we need to prep. Wow, this isn't working very well. So I prepare and then I take action. And I start to find ways of having emotional sobriety as well as sobriety. I find ways to connect as communities. I start taking that action, and then just like the acequia, I do maintenance so that I move out of that cycle and start having a higher quality life. These are the 12 steps of AA. I'm going to do the 12 steps of TED AA, of just TEDA. Because one day over at Rio Grande in Vegas, we had a new therapist. We didn't know the 12 steps, and it was right at the end of the program, end of the diet. It's like at 8:30. I wake up at 3:45 to 4:15 every morning, so 8:30 is like midnight or 2 or 3 in the morning. And And all of a sudden someone raises their hand and says, so what are these 12 steps? And the new therapist looks over at me. I'm like, oh, bro, you gotta be kidding. But did my Serenity Prayer, used that wisdom, and so I did them in a few seconds. And so this is what I said. Please don't be offended that I'm kind of ripping them apart in their own way. Step 1, life has become unmanageable in something. Life is not working. Step 2, I came to believe there was something greater than myself that could help me out, and I was trying to figure that out. Step 3, I finally started to figure that out, and I'm willing to turn my life over and my will over to that higher power of my understanding. This is the step of spirituality. We're going to come back to that, but we'll fly through. Step 4, I went and I did my inventory. I checked it all out, and I looked at everything, and woo, boy, that diaper was coming off, and I was scrubbing, and it wasn't any fun, but I was doing it. And after I'm done with that, I then share it with someone else, as well as my higher power with step 5, which means now I don't have secrets. So I don't run with an umbrella of shame that takes away the quality of my life and doesn't let water land on my garden. So step 5, I've admitted these things. Here I stand before you naked. And this is me, which means I'm claiming, I'm celebrating. Here I am. This is me. Step 6, we finally are at a place and we realize these things are going on. This is so much bigger than me, and I need to turn it over to something larger than me. And step 7, I ask, please remove these, I don't like that word, these shortcomings, these survival skills that have become non-productive habits. Please let me move from there so I can come from that authentic self. And then from there, I moved to 8, which so many people try to do 1, 2, 9. There is a reason there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Because otherwise I do 1, 2, 9 relapse. Because I still have others with my higher power. So when I go up and I go, Lawrence, I'm really sorry for slitting your tires for the last 2 years. And I'm like, oh, look, I said sorry. And Lawrence just got mad at me, so I might as well go use. So there is a reason we build that foundation, because it's for me. So in that 8, I find ways I've hindered anyone. In step 9, I go out and I make amends. I didn't think I'd go here tonight, but I will. Amends is where I'm stating my action that may have hurt somebody. I'm apologizing, and I'm saying what I'm going to do to amend that. Lawrence, this is made up, because I don't know if your tires have ever been slit. So for the last 3 years, I've gone out with that ice pick and slit your tires. I apologize. In the future, I am going to get rid of all my ice picks, and if I'm angry at you, I'm going to come to you and let you know my feelings. As well as over the next 10 years, I'm going to pay you $5 a month to try to pay back those tires. So I have an action. It's not, sorry, bro. I call those hit and runs. In other words, honey, get off my butt. Okay? From my back, or whatever you want it to do. So that is how an amends is made. Step 9 also, it's not where it's going to hurt another person. And then we can get to the debate if it's going to hurt me as well. So sometimes I might have to make silent amends. Sometimes I work on, and all of these I'm working with my sponsor and my therapist in my own world. Step 10, which is the one I like, it's 1 through 9. We're doing that piece. We make amends as quickly as we can. We do our inventory. In other words, we poop in our diaper, we clean our diaper, and we keep it that way so that we're not rebuilding a mess. 11, how am I connecting with the higher power of my understanding? How am I tithing? Tithing does not have to mean money. It can be, how do I spend time? This is a piece I learned at ministerial school. In the old days, tithing was financial, but it's also because the church covered so many things like life insurance, funeral insurance, all those things. So we financially tithe as well as spiritually tithe. How do I spend time with me and my higher power? Learning, hiking and finding elk, whatever it happens to be, going to church. And then the other third tithing is, how do I connect in the community? And 12, by finding out these things and finding out life can be okay, and I can maybe possibly give a little bit of hope to someone. In other words, I hand a flashlight, And you're going to do whatever you do with that flashlight, and I wish you well. I can pass this on. We can start something like central intake and see if that helps with flashlights. So 12 is taking that wisdom, which was in the Serenity Prayer, and now putting it in service as I've looked at what can I do and what can I not do. Tonight is Super Tuesday. I might be happy with the outcomes. I might not be. I might not care. But from that information, I can see what I do next. So 12 is that same idea. Where do I take that information and move forward? So the 12 steps, for me, helped save my life because it gave me a roadmap. Now, in some groups, they'd be really mad because I didn't state that exactly the same way. But it's a roadmap that can help me work and stay authentically connected. And so we start moving away from false gods. This is from a Gambling Anonymous. Buying lotto tickets, playing slots, and betting on horses. Woo-hoo, good day. Not if that's my addiction. We start moving out of that. And so we're still moving into this addictive interaction disorder, but then slowly we move to that outer circle. So we're expanding our authenticity. We're expanding how we connect. And so then we call a sponsor. We meditate. We exercise. We write in a journal. We go to an AA, Gambling Anonymous meeting. In the midst of my stuff, I was like, okay, I have to do yoga. Ashley, you'll love this. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to be spiritual. I'm going to yoga. Okay, so I'm doing my yoga and doing all the things. And every time I left the yoga class, I'll call it, all I wanted to do was punch somebody. And all I wanted to do the whole time was throw up. And finally, it was like, maybe right now yoga's not for me. And I went and did Tai Chi. And right at that time in my life, and I'm not dissing yoga, I think yoga is awesome, and actually at Golden Mother Retreat, they get to do it every morning. But at that time, I was so crippled that I had to slow it down and just really have very simple moves because everything was so fragile. And I was rebuilding myself. So my system went into fight just by trying to bend over. And look, I still can't bend over. But now I don't have to be a failure for not being able to do that. Now I can think of yoga as a way for me to be able to bend and flex and be able to move out of my comfort zone with the safety that I always get to come back. So we do these different pieces. This is a talk we gave about a year ago on the authentic self. Over time, we start to find our authentic self as we do these pieces. Nobody can tell us what it is. Well, we have many things that we've invented to survive. And I call them survival skills that have become non-productive habits. If I always want to fight and push everyone away because of my stinky diaper, that's a survival habit that's kept me alive. Over time, I honor those two, the bully, the scared child, the codependent or the contra-dependent, they're both codependency, and I move into this area. And so, I'm going to tell a very quick story. When I was at treatment, where I started thinking of this whole idea, I was called in on day 22, which quite often is step 3, turning your will over to a higher power. And I went into the office, and no one was allowed in. They did no one-on-one at the treatment center I went to. Everything was group. Anything one-on-one, you're playing God on your own path, and that's not working. It was very, very strict. And all of a sudden, I was in the counselor's office. And so I'm going, oh my goodness, what have I done wrong? I must have done something wrong. What's going on? Wait a minute, but I'm trying to be perfect. What's going on? And then I moved over to the bully. It's like, you know what? I'm not like Lonnie, who's going upstairs to the women's section and getting sex, or I'm not like Greg, who's going all the way hiking 4 miles to get cigarettes and come back. I'm actually doing my work. Why am I the one in here? And you know what? I also paid my money. And so I'm all in that place. About that time, the counselor walked in, and I was in this place. He goes, Ted, we need to work on step 3. This is right after my kids had died. It was about 5 months after. And all I wanted to do was die. And he goes, we have to find a way you have a higher power that you can turn your will over to. And I immediately said, without being a bully or scared child, just being Ted, you know what? I don't trust any higher power. If there is a God, God is evil. I'd like to think there's no God, but I keep asking for help. I'm also angry. But if there is a God, I'm not turning my will over to that God. Screw that. And he goes, I get it. I hear you, Ted. And he goes, tell me a few words that make sense to you. So my daughters had just died, like I'd said, and so I'm still in dad mode. So I said compassion, patience, and unconditional love. He took the magic marker, this piece of chalk, threw it in the air and goes, there's your higher power, and walked out of the room. I'm still sitting in this chair and said, do I go back to group? Do I sit here? And he walked in with a big grin on his face, and he goes, Ted, your higher power could be 3 words on the board. It just means you're taking time and you're running your decisions through those words first. That might be your first higher power. And it was. So these are actually my true identity, as I'd say it. And they're very sacred to me. That I feel we need to be able to share in here. And so if you notice, it's not those 3. Unconditional love, patience, compassion. My scared child ate that up. And I just thought, if I could have unconditional for all of you guys, and if I can be compassionate for all of you guys, and I can be patient with all of you, life is going to be great. Because that's how I'd survived. When I've been stabbed and stuff, it means someone in the room was not happy. So the scared child ate that up, but from there, as I continued to do my work, these pieces just went chunk, and they were just real to me. So now, before I make a decision on a good day, before I take that next step, I halt, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I add an S, sad. I run it through here, and if it aligns here, then I'm willing to take that step. Doesn't mean it always aligns. Some things in my life aren't that humorous. But they align. What is my intention? That piece. So even if your higher power is a few words on the chalkboard, that's okay. And from there, I can step forward. And I've, in this piece, used the analogy of skiing a lot, but I'm relearning how to ski. The moguls have changed. And this year I realized I need to learn how to ski differently, rather than thinking the moguls are going to go back to how they were in 1990. And I have new boots, but I'm still going to use that analogy. I look at a line that I'm going to ski down, and I'm going to look down 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 moguls, but then I come back to the present turn. If I'm not there for the present turn, and I'm still looking 6 moguls down, I'm going to blow out. Because I'm not present on this turn. Also, I don't know if there's a rock or a log. Never at Ski Valley. It's all perfect snow. All these different pieces. I don't know if I'm going to keep that line. It might change all of a sudden. But I look down there, and then I come back to the present. So I look for my goals. Carol, I'm just looking at you, but not you as a human being, even though you're a wonderful human being. So I pick my goals, which might be to get down the mountain. I pick that goal, and then I come back to this next turn. Because as I have that goal and I'm moving forward, and I'm doing this piece, all of a sudden, there's a rock here. Maybe my goal ends up over here. I'm still moving forward through this. And in that, I become a co-creator with my higher power. I have a goal. I line it up. I make my next turn. Now we'll move it back to this world. I take my next step. I look at my next goal. I analyze this. I run it through here. And I take my next step. Now, they say control's an illusion. That's partially true. I actually think there's one place we have control, and that's in making a decision. I am deciding to pick up my right foot and move it forward. I'm glad it happened. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I get to make that choice. So if that's the one place I get to make a choice, I want to do it to the best I can. So in that, I become a co-creator with a higher power, even if it's 3 words on the board. Now for me, I'd say this is my chapel within, but luckily it's grown so big there's no way I always thought it was strange when in treatment quite often, even when I worked at Betty Ford. So tell me your higher power. I have no words for my higher power. My higher power is just, but even on those days, I can come back to this. And for that 11th step, where I need to find out prayers in different ways, if I'm not finding God, I can always pray to my daughters, which is unconditional love, and they'll get it wherever it needs to go. So we find different ways of connecting to a higher power, so I'm not alone in having a stinky diaper. So in that, we start to come up with a self-care plan. And so we start working on ways of building this foundation. Because then when we have more losses, we can keep them clean and we can grow a garden of bounty. So we find different ways. From my frontal lobe, I'm looking for rewards, not instant gratification. So I start to look for how can I have peace and serenity? If I had blown this off tonight, I would not have peace and serenity no matter what I was doing. And boy, would I not want to come into the town tomorrow morning. So we find different ways of connecting the bedrock to connect with others. And in that, we start to have healthy boundaries, but we still connect. Ashley, can I talk about you for a minute? I promise it's safe. Ashley has a tendency as I'm going through the halls and looking at this and what's Medicaid doing now and what's Medicare doing. And I got to call Sherry, but I don't have time because that car just pulled in and I'm not sure why they're here. And Ashley will just walk up and hand me a Hershey Kiss. And she calls it hummingbird food. Well, those are the things that can give me a moment to stop and move back into myself rather than get caught in this other part of my brain. And so that peace and serenity, finding healthy people to be with, finding ways to connect, it doesn't have to mean romantically, it doesn't have to mean sexually, but connecting. And so in that spiritual connection, we're moving back and forth. On a national level, since it is Super Tuesday, and Lawrence already kind of hinted that we're not supposed to talk about politics, I'm not doing that on a national level. We're watching more and more split as fear increases, rather than what do we have in common so we can make this a better quality life for us all. And so we find those ways. And so maybe we're not hanging out with people that are like-minded all the time, but maybe they hold that very special secret. Carol's one of my biggest teachers. That got you a little shot. Carol walks so deeply with her religion and spirituality. I walk so deeply with my spirituality that I can glean from Carol the importance for her of her religion. And in that, I can honor it to a deeper level. And so there's different ways. It doesn't mean I have to go jump into her church. She'd probably say, go elsewhere. No, she wouldn't do that. But I can glean from that as I watch her walk with that with so much peace and beauty. Someone like Maria, meet me at the chapel and we can do ceremony. These different pieces of how do we connect and hold one another. And the last piece I want to say on this, like I said, so then we'll get out of it. I'm going to go back to that room where I left you. And so I'm sitting in that room going, should I leave? Should I stay? Vinny came back. And by the way, Vinny, I give him a lot of credit because he lives on through me. He died about 6 years ago of an overdose after 28 years of sobriety. And that breaks my heart because that whole thing I showed earlier, He's one of the reasons I'm alive, but he lives on by me talking about him tonight. So Vinny came back in, and I went back to the big group. And Patty was in there talking. And since it's day 22, we're working on that third step. And as I walked in, she goes, God is understanding. And what that means is God is standing under. And when she did this move, I think it's the deepest I've ever sat down in my chair, because I didn't even trust my chair to support me. But somehow when she did this move, it wasn't God doing to me, it wasn't people doing it to me, but whatever's going on, I was held. So then I went walking around, because I like to process, and I was like, oh, so I'm going to take this back to Taos. And in 1996, we had the big Cuesta fire. It came over the mountain. So we all see that, the scar of that. And so this was in beginning of 1997, so that fire was still there. And I didn't know, because of what had happened in my world, I didn't know what caused that fire, and that doesn't matter. But I thought about, God doesn't sit up there and take that lightning bolt and go, I'm taking out that ponderosa pine right there. It's going down. No, the earth does the earth. Nature does nature. Fires are going to happen. Children are going to die. People are going to get cancer. Brothers are going to die in a shipwreck. But what can happen is my higher power can stand under understanding as I walk through those pieces, so I'm no longer alone. And then the best I can do is not get caught in my stinking thinking and forget that this piece is there. I don't like change, and change happens daily. And in that, I am held. I might not like, I hope I do, I might not like when I get home tonight and it's like, why haven't you cleaned a hot tub? Or whatever it is. I'm hoping I get, hi honey, I'm glad you're home. But I don't know. But either one, I am being held, and my wonderful wife doesn't become my higher power, but becomes interdependent with me, and we have a nice home. So she doesn't become my false god, which then means I gotta go use my other false gods, so I better go drink or do whatever, and I have a whole garden of weeds rather than my flower. But if one thing you can take tonight, I hope, is that idea, no matter what name, no matter what piece, maybe 3 words on the board, no matter what's going on, there is understanding and a higher power that makes sense to me, to my understanding, is standing under. And for me, it's gone now, but that's okay. For me, it's running it through those ideas before I take that next step, so I can be a co-creator with my higher power, which means on a good day when my brain's working well, I am not alone. I can't usually, I don't think this is a word, intelligentize out of most of my situations. I can use my intelligence to decide what that next step is, and then even give up where that step is going to be. The floor might have just caved in. I might have fallen over. I'm glad I didn't. But that's the one place I get to have a choice. And if I run it through those places, and I have a foundation, my brain gets to know, no matter what's going on, there's safety. I can have serenity inside, no matter what's going on outside. Rarely is there peace in the external world. But I can have the disciplines and the connection to keep serenity, and that's what I protect here. I was scared to death to do this talk because it bored me to death when I heard it in Tucson from a big guru. But I can have serenity here because I can love you all, but none of you are my higher power. And I know I'm okay, and my only intention is maybe a couple flashlights go out there that help someone in their moment of darkness to realize they have a higher power. Thank you very much. Appreciate you guys.